Welcome to the Writer's Journey podcast. I'm Michael Laron, a science fiction and fantasy author on a journey to go from nobody to bestseller, and I'm documenting every step of the way. Tune in every week as I pull back the curtain on my writing life and how I'm building a writing career while working a full-time job, raising a family, and attending law school classes in the evenings. You can find show notes for this week's episode, a free starter library of my fiction, and much more at michaellaron.com. Hello, and welcome to episode 117. 117 is a great number, and in this episode, I titled it Failure, Failure, Failure. Oh man, it's going to be a fun episode to talk about, because one of the things I've always believed about this show is turning on the mic every week and talking about what my wins are, and I win a lot, which is great, but also having the courage to talk about my failures, because I think that that is also important and in many cases more instructive than the things that I am being successful at, because I do think that the career of a writer, the career of anyone for that matter, is 1,000 failures, 10,000 failures, right? And understanding what those are maybe can help you avoid some of them. So anyway, that is going to be the topic of this episode, but it's not going to be depressing. I will keep it chipper, but there is kind of a major bummer. So first off, announcements. First thing is to remember to join my fan club to get notifications when my newest book releases. And that book is going to be Your Self-Publishing Questions Answered, 150 plus writing, publishing, and marketing tips for authors. And we made a minor change, a minor tweak to the subtitle this past week. It is also for authors, but it's also for poets, because most of the tips in the book also apply to poets. And you guys know I've talked about this on this channel or on this podcast all the time. I wrote a little book in 2015 called Indie Poet Rockstar, and it is the poet's guide to self-publishing, ebooks, and marketing in the self-publishing digital era. And that book was ahead of its time, but that book is starting to see a lot more sales now that poets are realizing that they can take control of their work and make money without the assistance of a publisher. And so we're going to market it for them as well, which I think is a great thing. It'll help improve the sales of Indie Poet Rockstar, and it'll expand our audience enough to where it's not too broad. So anyway, just remember to join my fan club, authorlevelup.com/fan club, to get notifications when it launches. And I cannot wait to share more information on that with you. So next topic, wins for the week. I've also, as I was typing this and getting ready for this week's episode, I was like, this is going to be the first time I've done this segment where I'm actually doing losses for the week as well. So I'm not only going to talk about my wins, but I'm also going to talk about my losses or my loses. I don't know if that's even grammatically correct. So my win, and this is a pretty big one, is that my vocal booth is built. And I've begun recording my first audiobook, which is the audiobook to Your Self-Publishing Questions Answered. So you are going to hear me in if you like my voice, or if you think that this show is pleasant to listen to, then I hope that the audiobook ticks off that box as well. Fun fact, I am not using this microphone. In fact, I'm recording this microphone in an area that is not treated at all. In fact, I've got 5 walls. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 walls in this basement. And 4 of them are cinder block walls, which is a microphone's worst enemy. So I don't have any treatment. You can hear a lot of reverb in my voice. You can hear the room in my voice. And that's a lot of it's just because it's just convenience, right? But my vocal booth, I've got this little Harry Potter closet. I renovated it. I had this crazy plan, and a lot of times when I do these crazy plans, 50% of the time they fizzle out, and the other 50% of the time they work really well. So I got a bunch of poster board, kind of like the poster board that you'd get at your local arts and crafts store, and then I got about 50 acoustic foam panels, and then I put the foam panels on the poster board, and then I taped the sections of the poster board together to build like a little wall. And then using command strips, I've got some wooden joists in this closet. The closet is cement cinder block, but there's some wood joists. So I use command strips to attach the poster board to the joists. So basically I created a makeshift wall. So if you walk in there, it literally looks like the whole wall is acoustic foam. And I've got a little vocal booth, and then I've got a little vocal booth within that vocal booth, and then I put my microphone in there. And I tested it out, and it sounds fantastic. In fact, I compared my first couple of demos to other books on self-publishing and audio that are currently on the market, and I think it sounds comparable. In some cases, sounds a little bit better. So this plan worked. I don't know how I was able to get this to work, but yeah, my new microphone and new setup, it sounds fantastic. I think I'm going to need to figure out the equalizer, get some EQ settings, and do some things that I don't do to my voice on this show. But I think it's going to sound really, really good, and it's going to sound really professional, which is, I've always said I'm not going to do this unless I can do it professionally. And so this was God, I don't even know how much I spent to do this. I mean, I bought a mic, I bought a digital interface, bought all this acoustic foam and all this other stuff. It's probably about a $1,500 to $2,000 investment, which ironically is what it would cost to produce one professional audiobook. So hopefully I can make that back. I think that I can. I make well more than that on audio every year. So I think that this investment will pay for itself. And it's still early though, so we'll see. But I'm considering that a win for the week. I was really, really pleased with the first demo, and I hope that you guys will be pleased with what you hear as well. So I'll share more as soon as I am able. And so now let's talk about my loss for the week. So, all right. So I talked about this last week, and I said this might be my Achilles heel, and that is, how can I come up with a way to offer an alternative for Mac users who are going to be using my sales tool? So I've got this sales tool I'm building. Windows users are going to have a field day with it. This will be a huge improvement and a huge efficiency for them, which is rare because writers who use Windows machines are usually left out. So I think that's kind of a cool thing. And Mac users who can run Windows on their computer can also use this tool in its full glory. They will win as well. But the problem with that is some people just hate Windows. Some people don't want the inconvenience of running Windows on their computer. Some people don't have computers that are powerful enough to run Windows. There are a number of different reasons why people don't want to run Windows on their computers. They want to just use a Mac only solution. And so I said, okay, let me try to figure out a way to get this sales tool to work on the Mac, even though the Mac has a lot of shortcomings. You can't do any kind of good data manipulation or data analysis on your Mac. It's just not possible. Apple is just not set up to do what I need it to do. And even if I could come up with a tool for Mac users, you're still at a significant disadvantage. And I just have to be clear about that. But I tried. And so it didn't quite work out. So I partnered with a developer, and I told the developer, hey, here's what I need. Take a look at this. Let me pay you for your time. And, he looked at it, and he wasn't able to get it to work. And he basically said, I can do it for you, but I'm going to have to charge you a significant amount of money. And there's still only a 50% chance that we'll even be able to get this to work. And so at that point I said, okay, I just got to stop going down this path. It's not worth it. It's going to derail the rest of the project, and I just kind of have to cut my losses. So it doesn't mean that I'm completely shutting the door, but for now, it just means that this tool will only be available to Windows users and Mac users who can run Windows on their computer. And I actually consider that to be a colossal failure. It's a colossal failure for the marketability and viability of the product, but it's not a surprise, right? And so I have to be. Let me explain why. Let me just back up here for a second. Let me explain why I consider this to be a failure. I consider it to be a failure because, one, if you're going to come up with a solution for folks, you need to have a solution that works for most people, right? Because otherwise, there's not any mass appeal, right? And you got to have a solution that is going to work equally or as equally as possible for most people. And I wasn't able to swing that. It's still a huge, gigantic success that I was able to solve this problem, right? I mean, I've talked about this for the last 8 weeks or so. You guys know how happy I am about this problem, and I certainly solved it for myself. But just a little sad that I wasn't able to solve it for more people at this time. I've been talking to some other people who are looking into some alternatives that we might be able to explore. I don't really have a whole lot of hope at this point, just because, like I said, the sales tool on Windows, it helps you. It basically is a ticket to the promised land. Like I'm just getting you in the gates of the next universe, so that you have all these sorts of things that are available to you now after using my tool on a Windows machine. On a Mac machine, even if I was able to get you to that gate, you wouldn't be able to do anything else with your data because of the Mac atmosphere, right? There just are no good data analysis apps on the Mac. Excel is not as powerful. Numbers is really a joke when you think about all the things that Excel can do. And so, I didn't really develop this project or this product for the money. That wasn't a major driver for me. I get far more enjoyment and far more benefit, at least from a career perspective for me, from trying to find problems that I can solve. Right, I'm a problem solver. I care about the money, but it wasn't that important because I knew that the market for this would be pretty small anyway, right? So I developed this with just the intent of helping people, and it's kind of unfortunate that I won't be able to help as many people as I wanted to. So anyway, I think I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the topic for the week. I've gone on too long anyway, but I do consider it a failure, and it was a little bit bittersweet when I had to kind of make that decision. So, lesson learned this week. So for writing lessons, the things I learned about in writing this week. I learned the power of experimenting and going with the flow in the moment. And I've always known this, but it's something that you relearn in different flavors throughout your career. And I'm doing that right now with my book, The Author Income Problem. So I'm writing a book about this. It's going a little slow because I'm focused on developing the product, and I'm building it for a few people right now. So, I'm doing a couple thousand words at a time here and there. But I'm trying some different rhetorical techniques when I'm writing this. So with all my nonfiction for writers, I try different things. I do it with my fiction too, but I try different ways to influence and make an impact and make my points. And I'm doing some kind of different things with this, and it's kind of fun. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, and I'll be very curious to see what people think about it. So just remember to keep experimenting, go with the flow, trust your gut, right? So my business lesson that I learned is that sometimes minimum viable products fail, which I just talked about. So not going to really go into that much more. Copyright lesson. So I read an article in the Hot Sheet. It's by Jane Friedman about a lawsuit from an author against, I believe it was Simon and Schuster. Basically, this author wrote a book, and Simon and Schuster bought the book from another author that basically it appears that author B ran author A's book through what's called a text spinner. So a text spinner, it's something that's been used in the academic world for a very long time. It's what the bad guys use to plagiarize. So they take a college essay from the internet, and then they run it through this text spinner. The text spinner changes some names, changes some structures here and there, and it produces, if it works, a college essay that the person can turn in and hopefully pass and not have to do anything, right? And you pay $20-$30, maybe a little bit more, and you don't have to do any work, you don't have to do any research, and it's a college professor's worst nightmare, right? So it appears that the author did the same thing, and now this is all alleged, I'm just going to say that the author did the same thing with author A's book. So imagine if, I took Harry Potter and I ran it through a text spinner software, right? And I got this book, and the book is called Larry Rotter, I'm just kind of being kind of funny. But it has all the same characters, very similar things, and many of the phrases are very similar. And maybe I use Beyonce on page 6, and the source material uses Beyonce on page 6, right? That's what this was kind of about. And there's other elements for there are other elements in this case that I think it's a pretty clear case of copyright infringement, right? If you're gonna rip off someone's work like that, using software like that, you're just gonna get caught with unclean hands every time, right? But if you do it right, if you're truly committing copyright infringement and you do it the right way, if you've got software that's smart enough to do it, then theoretically no one would be able to tell the difference, right? And so the really interesting question that came up with this was, as we move into a world with artificial intelligence and these softwares getting smarter, right? Does that affect what we do as writers, right? I think it's really interesting, and it's really alarming. I remember feeling this emotion of, oh my God, what happens when more authors start doing this to rip off books that are currently on the market, and who's to say that this isn't being done already, and that's another scary thing, because as I said before, I talked to an intellectual property attorney, and he always told me that he can't try an intellectual property case for under $100,000. I don't know about you. I don't have that kind of money laying around. I bet you could probably get this software for extremely cheap, right? We have the tools to run them on our computers today. And so I just worry about that in the future, as this technology gets easier and easier to use and install, if this is going to become a problem that we and the community have to deal with. And I also wonder, too, what kind of opportunities for good software like this would have. If you think about all the books that I've written, right? What if I could run all of my writing books through a text spinner software and create something very similar to what I've written that finds themes and elements that maybe I haven't explored in greater detail, right? Like, all of that's very, very interesting. And then it begs the question of who owns the copyright to that. Does the programmer that created the software own the copyright, or does the author own the copyright? Just interesting stuff, interesting things to be aware of as we move into this new digital age, right? Becoming the writer of the future. What does that look like? And also, how do you remain a writer in the future? It's also something you have to think about. So, idea for the week. This is an idea that I had that I actually got really excited about it. This is something I am going to be doing. A lot of these ideas I've given away over the past few weeks, I just say you guys can have them. You can take them. You guys can have this idea as well, because it's not necessarily something that's going to be commercially viable, right? It's one of those behind the hood or behind the curtain things that you can do in your business that I think would have a lot of power. And that is, I've talked about how I built a book database, right? So I keep all of my book data in this database so I can recall it at any time, yada, 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 right? I've belabored that point enough. But wouldn't it be interesting if I could integrate my book database with my next website? So I think about my website now, and actually I have three websites. I have michaellaron.com, authorlevelup.com, and elliottparkerpoetry.com. It's third one is what I use for my poetry pen name. I have three websites. michaellaron.com has, I think, probably 30 books on it. No, maybe 40. authorlevelup.com has about 5 or 6. elliottparkerpoetry.com has about 3, I think. And I think about maintaining all of those book pages. I don't know of any solution right now that makes it easy to add books to your website. There are some plugins out there. I know that. Like for WordPress, there's a couple out there. I've used all of them. They all have their shortcomings. Some of them are decent, right? But managing your books, it's a continuous problem as a writer, because the more books you have, the more difficult it is to manage your inventory. And when you're focused on that next book, it's really easy to not think about book 1 and book 2 as the years go by. So I started writing in 2014, and now it's 2020. Well, of course I'm going to be focused on my 2020 books. And so my 2014 and 2015 and 2016 books, they're going to fall by the wayside, right? So how do you manage your intellectual property in a way that it continues to be in a position to make you money? I just believe that this it's one of the fundamentals, right? And Another element to this problem is, well, I have this database on my website, or this database where I manage all my books. I've got all my books metadata, all the pricing information, the book description, the cover, everything, right? So when I'm building my next website, because I'm due for one, I just don't want to pony up the money to build one yet, because it's going to have to be fairly customized, and I'm not ready for that yet. So, but when I am ready to build it, wouldn't it be interesting if I could have the developer scrape the data from my book database to populate pages on my website? So for example, let's say that I publish a new book and I go in and I enter it into the database, right? And my website, basically I can click a button on my website and then it will instantly generate a page for that book with all the correct buy links, the correct book descriptions, the correct book covers, the Amazon Kindle look inside, Kindle previewer thing, whatever you call it, testimonials, reviews, all of those things with the click of a button. And I don't have to enter in any content on my website, WordPress or whatever the website is. It just pulls all that information from my book database so that I only ever have to enter the information once. And if I need to make a change, make the change on my database, go click a little button on WordPress, and it updates everything. Wouldn't that be interesting? Because then I wouldn't have to worry about changing things on my website. That's one of my big bugbears. It's one of my bugbears. Whenever I have to change something on my website, because it's really, really easy to forget. And it's really, really easy to break stuff. Like, it's not that hard to accidentally put a wrong link on one of your buttons or those sorts of things, right? Or maybe you start publishing your books at some new retailer and you want to make sure that readers know that you can get your book at this new retailer, right? Well, all of that becomes a problem. And so if I could find a way to integrate my book database with my next website, that would be great. And the great part about this is one of my very first jobs out of college was working for a web development company. And they built websites for businesses. And I can recall many, many times where these small businesses, these mom and pop businesses, they use Microsoft Access as a way to maintain their inventory or their products. And the developers all the time found ways to integrate the website with Microsoft Access. So I know that is a possible thing to do. And oh man, would that give me an advantage? It would take my website development and maintenance that I spend currently, and it would drop it by half. Maybe more than that, right? And in the future, outsourcing the maintenance of my website is something that I think is best done to an assistant, right? But therefore, I've automated a fair amount of the maintenance, and then the assistant, all they have to do is patrol and just make sure that there's nothing really weird going on the site, right? So I think that's a perfect use case of how you can hire an assistant to help you out and patrol your property. Although I do think there are other ways as well to manage this, but I can't go into that. Anyway. So that's my idea for the week. Take it if you see some value in it. And then, okay, so let's get to the topics here. I know I've gone on a little longer than usual with stuff before I got to the topic, but I'm feeling very inspired today. So I've had some thoughts about failure in light of this recent project. And again, don't get me wrong, I fully understand the victory that I have made, and certainly it's going to help some people. It's a new and unique type of product that I've never done before, and I think that it's probably ahead of its time. And so those are all things that those are wins, right? But I do like to reflect on failures because I think that failure offers a number of different opportunities when you think about it. The first is an opportunity to reflect. All right. So as I think about this problem and not being able to help a fair amount of people that I wanted to help, it makes me think about, well, why? Right. And I keep asking, okay, why isn't this possible? Why did this fail? What were the shortcomings of the product? What were the shortcomings of the approach? How might I have done this differently in the future? How might I have adjusted my messaging in the very beginning? Because I was very open about this, that My messaging in the very beginning of this sales tool was not very good at all. All right, that's just a constant opportunity to reflect. I also think that it offers an opportunity to be humble. Like I said, I was a little down about it, but it's it's a good thing to fail sometimes, right? Because you can think about, I don't know, I get energized by failure just as much as I do by success, because I think sometimes failure can be a better teacher. And so, yeah, it didn't work. So how can I take that and learn from it and use that information in a way that will help me better next time? And I also think failure provides an opportunity to be grateful. I'm extremely grateful that I was able to figure this problem out for myself, and I've been grateful for everyone who has reached out and offered feedback and who's offered to help in some way. And I just, you can't, I don't know, it's an amazing feeling, right? And then it also gives you the opportunity to learn. And I was thinking about some other failures in my writing life that I would love to share with you at this point, hopefully as a way to be instructive. But what I also think is that the writing life is a constant tug of war with success and failure, right? Like you can have success 1 minute and then have failure the next minute, and then have success again and failure again. And I think a true career, if you were able to look at someone's career through a microscope, not just listen to what they tell you, but actually look at what they've done, right? I think you would see strings of successes and strings of failures, right? And whether the person was aware or whether they were aware that they were learning from them, I don't know. But I still think that the pathways would be there and you would be able to see them, right? So this constant tug of war, and I know that I personally have felt this way as a writer, because there'll be some days where, at least when I first started, where I felt like, oh, wow, all right, cool. I've learned how to write a book faster, right? And then I put that book up on the market and that book doesn't sell. So I had a huge win because I was able to write a better book faster that I was happy about. But the book didn't do very well at all. There'd be times where I would do a marketing campaign, and the marketing campaign would net me some money and it would be great. But then the next marketing campaign that I did wouldn't net me any money at all. And sometimes those were for factors outside of my control. But there's just constant. I mean, it's just, it's almost like the reality of the world that we live in. And I've been talking a lot about myself here, but I think that if you look at your own career, I think you could also see exactly what I'm talking about. At least I hope that's what you could see. Because no one gets successful right out of the gate. Very few people do that. And sometimes that can be deadly. It can be damaging to be that successful early on, especially when you haven't mastered your fundamentals. And so as you're learning, as you are figuring out the craft of writing and business and marketing, just know that those failures are going to come just as rapidly as the successes. And it's going to be very disheartening when you have those failures. But I think that the failures, as I said before, are often more successful teachers than success, because there's been many times in my life where this has been true. And so I wanted to talk about a few of the big failures in my writing life, and then I can talk about a few of the small failures too, because I've done some YouTube videos on this and people have said that they've appreciated me sharing this. So I think one of the first things that I consider a major failure in my early writing life was I started a YouTube channel. That wasn't a failure. That was one of those things where I started and I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea if it would be a success, and I just kind of planned on throwing a few videos up and then walking away. I didn't think it would be very successful. But it turns out it actually was one of the more successful things I did in my first year of publishing. So starting a YouTube channel, and about 18 months into the life of that YouTube channel, there was just some personal circumstances that happened in my life. I had some chickens in my basement that I was watching. This is a true story. I had chickens in my basement, and every time I went down to record the videos, the chickens would start clucking because they didn't like me. They didn't like all the lights, and it was like 5:30 in the morning, and they're like, "This is What are you doing? So I wasn't able to record in my basement in my normal atmosphere. And then my basement flooded after we got rid of our chickens. So I had the problem with that. And then I started law school. There was just so many there was personal circumstances. In many respects, some of them were probably excuses. But one of the gigantic failures out of all of that was that I stopped communicating with my YouTube audience. I not once did I ever tell anyone why I took a hiatus. I never sent out a newsletter. I had a sizable list at that point. I didn't communicate with people, and so people just forgot about me, right? And so when I decided to come back to YouTube around, I think it was June 2018, people were really happy to see me, and it was great. But my view levels and my watch time and even my YouTube revenue just was not at the same level it was before I left, because I lost a lot of people. That I lost a prime opportunity to communicate with my audience about what had gone wrong with me, right? And what I didn't realize, what I thought was, in my own weird head, I thought, well, I don't want to be one of those people that puts up a video and says, hey guys, I'm really sorry, I'll be back, and then they never come back, right? Like that, in my head, that's what I was thinking, right? Because I couldn't see into the future, and I wasn't smart enough to realize that, hey, maybe I am going to come back, and I'm going to come back bigger and better and stronger and faster and all this stuff, and I'm going to do things differently. But I wasn't making that much money at the time. I would have never thought that I would be making enough money where I could buy a DSLR camera and upgrade the quality of my channel, and so I just kind of let the thing die. And that was a huge, huge mistake. That's why I talk all the time about consistency and showing up even when you don't want to show up. That's why I've done this podcast, and I've bent over backwards to make sure that I'm always communicating with my audience. In fact, I over communicate with you guys. I really do. I over communicate with you on my email newsletter. I do an email newsletter once a month, and that people who are on that list, they know that you're going to get a communication from me once a month. And I put a lot of stuff in there. I break a lot of the email marketing best practices. Like, I intentionally break them, right? Because I want you guys to know what's going on with me. Some good information that you might be able to get. I share content from other people that I think would be very helpful. I don't try to monetize that in any way. I just do that as a way to communicate. It becomes a communication channel, right? And then I'll also communicate when I have new books and so on and so forth. But as I look back on my career, that was a colossal mistake. Never stop communicating with your audience. And I learned that very, very quickly. That's all I'll say about that. But that was, as I look back on my career, as I was coming up with a list of things to talk about, that was the first one that kind of jumped on my radar. And I think the reason it was a better teacher was because, let me put it this way, it was a better teacher than having success on YouTube, right? Because having success on YouTube was cool. Like, it got me on the creative pen. Like, there was all sorts of really good things that came out of it, right? But I don't know that having that early success on YouTube necessarily translated to anything I'm doing today. I mean, obviously I'm still continuing to do it, but not communicating with my audience, that was something that was, I didn't realize the seriousness of the impact it would cause until far into the future, right? So if I had kept communicating with folks, I probably would have double the amount of YouTube subscribers that I have today. Let's put it that way, and let's leave it at that. So the second failure that I had in my career was very, very early on. I think I talked about this on the show. Basically, my first novel was a choose-your-own-adventure for adults. And I thought this was going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. Like many authors, when they do their first book, they think that their first book, it can do no wrong. I mean, you're feeling really proud about it, and you should feel proud about it, right? But I was unrealistic in my expectations. I was so unrealistic that I thought that there were other authors that were doing the same thing, and they were having some success, but what I didn't realize at the time was that very few of these authors were full-time authors, right? They were just writing books and people were buying them, but they weren't necessarily like knocking it out of the park. but I thought they were millionaires, not exactly. But so I thought, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to join the ranks of these authors and I'm going to make a lot of money off of this book. First book was called How to Be Bad, Decision Select novel. And the premise of the book essentially is it's a choose your own adventure for adults. And so I thought, this brand was going to be super hot, and I thought I was going to create this new trend, and people were going to start trying to knock off of it, and just all this crazy stuff. I look back on my thoughts, and I'm like, man, I was an idiot. So what I went and did was the brand of the series was called Decision Select. So I went out and I hired a trademark attorney, and I trademarked the term Decision Select. I couldn't use Choose Your Own Adventure, so I created my own brand, Decision Select. I went out and hired somebody to do a logo, paid a couple $100 to do that. Then I hired a trademark attorney, and it cost me, I think it was like $1,000. And then there was some more fees associated with it as well. And I got the trademark approved by the United States Trademark Office. Like, it was pretty cool. But the only problem was it was an extremely expensive thing, and the book didn't sell very many copies at all. In fact, I sold 3 books my first month of publishing. I think I maybe sold 20 books my first year, and the book was a commercial disaster. And so I spent all this money on a trademark and then another mistake that I made was that I didn't realize. Well, I did realize it, but I didn't realize how stupid this was, because a trademark in the United States, it really is only valid in the United States. Other countries will acknowledge your trademark. Like, there is certainly reciprocation, but like if someone else if there was a company that had the trademark Decision Select in France, for example, that wouldn't stop them from trying to get my book removed from the market, right? So like, there was all sorts of legal quandaries, and my attorney basically told me, if you're going to do this, it's going to be too expensive for me to file trademarks in every country in the world for you. Like, only very, very large companies can do that. So what I would advise you to do is to make your trademark only available, or display your trademark only on the United States version of the book. So I had this book, and I had 2 editions. I had the U.S. edition, which had the trademark and all the protections on it. And then I had an international edition, which didn't have any of the trademark protections on it, so that would protect me internationally. So I had to maintain 2 different books. Oh, I told you I was an idiot. It didn't make any sense at all. And I spent all this money on this for a book that was a commercial disaster, right? Like, I think about that $1,000. I mean, I could have probably produced 2 other books for that cost. I mean, I could have upgraded my website. I could have put that money in my commercial savings account. I mean, there's so many wiser, more prudent things that I could have done instead of hiring a trademark. And that was just a disaster, right? So I disowned the trademark. I abandoned it. I walked away from it. But now I talk about failure being a good teacher. Now it seems like trademark issues are starting to come into the writing community, right? So we all remember the Cockeygate thing. We all remember a random author trying to trademark a name for their series that's a very common name. Like, someone tried to do Dark. There were some others, I think. And it seems like trademark issues are starting to encroach into the writing community, right? And I think that the knowledge that I learned in getting this trademark, because I mean, I spent a lot of time on the phone talking to this trademark attorney, and all that information is still helpful for me. So as we start becoming more trademark savvy, as writers do that, I feel like I have maybe a little bit of an advantage, or at least a little bit more knowledge than maybe the average person. So maybe that will help me someday. Maybe it won't. But that was another gigantic, very expensive failure that I experienced very, very early on in my writing life. And so those are the 2 big ones, right? So then I think about, it's like some smaller failures, like some things that was like, I maybe shouldn't have done that, or blah, blah, blah. I was trying to dictate once, and I didn't want to buy a very expensive microphone. So I bought one of these little cheapy Bluetooth headsets on Amazon. I think it was like $40. And I got the little headset and I put it in my ear and I got it all set up to dictate. And I was using Dragon to dictate my novel. And I started dictating it. And it turns out the Bluetooth headset didn't even pick up half of what I was saying. Like, I was just better off using the microphone on my laptop rather than spending the money on this crappy Bluetooth headphone. And so that was $40 I wasted, you know? I was able to use it for other things, but like I tried to dictate a number of different ways and it didn't work. And I had to continuously try different methods in order to figure it out. Like, that was an example, I think, of a smaller failure that, you know, I could have done a better job of maybe doing my research, that sort of thing. I've had failures at the paragraph level in my novels, right? So like, I had a novel once where I was trying to write a fight scene, and I was trying to do some unique things with the pacing, and it didn't work. It didn't work because readers let me know about it, and so I don't know. You're just gonna have failures throughout your writing life. That's my ultimate message for you today. Is you're gonna have those failures. What can you learn from them? Because as I said before, failure is an opportunity to reflect. It's an opportunity to be humble. It's an opportunity to be grateful. And it's an opportunity to learn. So what can you learn from your failures? Because I know that you probably had a failure today. So what was your failure today and what did it teach you? And learn from your successes too, right? I'm not trying to discount success, but I think that failure makes you wiser, and I think it makes for better stories. So with that, I'm going to end it for this week's episode. Hope everybody's doing great. Hope everybody's staying happy. Hope everybody's staying healthy, and I will holler at you next week. Peace. Thanks for joining me this week. If you enjoyed this episode, you'll enjoy my backlist episodes at michaelaran.com/podcast. For your free starter library of my favorite novels, join my fan club by visiting michaelaran.com/fanclub. If you're a writer and want to connect with me further, check out my YouTube channel, Author Level Up, for helpful writing advice at authorlevelup.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week.